Make sure I got my right device set up here. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another edition of Beef, Bacon, and Eggs at Islam for Europeans. And I am joined with our esteemed guest, my brother in Islam. Oh, sorry about this. I gotta mute this part.
Okay.
You're gonna go. How do I do this? Can you, okay, I just want to make sure I'm not, how's it going, Tyler?
It's going good, my esteemed host.
Okay. How's the weather there in North Carolina?
It's pretty mild. A little rainy, but otherwise good. How are things in Canada? You said you're in Windsor. Is that right?
I'm in London, actually.
London.
And I have a problem with my... Okay, I gotta show this. Okay, that's better. Can you hear me now still, Tyler? Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Okay, I had another screen where the volume was on, so I was hearing two voices at the same time on delay. My head was ready to explode. Okay, so okay, alhamdulillah, we're all good now. So yeah, I just wanted to just thank you for coming on the show. And we've never really had a convert from the southern U.S. Talk to us, so I'm really glad to have you on. I think you might be the first one. We had Assad on, but you're good. Assad, you're good friends with him, and he was your imam.
Yeah, he's the imam here. I think he's the imam in Charlotte now, right?
Okay.
But I've known him from before, from when I first embraced Islam, and yeah, he's great. I'm actually broadcasting from his house right now. He was kind enough to let me use it. So,
alhamdulillah, Assad's a good brother. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself, Tyler. Your background growing up, and how it eventually led, how you before you converted to Islam.
Sure. Well, I'm from North Carolina. I was raised here in Gastonia, and not really from anywhere else. My parents, both of them, were from North Carolina, basically as far back as anyone can possibly go. So I went to elementary school, middle school, high school here, and then I went to Chapel Hill for college. And that's where I embraced Islam, at UNC Chapel Hill. And shortly after, I moved to Durham, and I lived in that area for pretty much the rest of my life. I had a little bit where I lived in Virginia for a couple of years, but other than that, I've been in the Raleigh-Durham area since college.
Okay. Yeah, and how did you tell us a little bit about your journey to Islam? I know it gets tiring talking about your conversion story all the time, but just you can make it as brief as you want, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's not tiring. It's just the opposite, actually. It's inspiring and motivating. And I think that we as converts, sometimes we shy away from telling our story because we don't want to be in the spotlight.
Yeah.
At least that's how I felt in the beginning. I felt like I was being thrust in the spotlight sometimes, and I didn't want that. But I've been Muslim now for 15 years. I'm 37. So I now I kind of see it as part of my responsibility. Allah says in the Quran, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, wa amma bi ni'mati rabbika fahaddith." He says, which translated means, as for the favors of your Lord, then talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
or tell your story. So here I am. Before I was Muslim, I was pretty confused. If anybody's watching this who's from that part of my life, and I hope some of you are, I plan to post this around. You know that I was a pretty confused person. I was going back and forth between Christianity and atheism, like pretty much like a cycle. And so that was difficult for me because I I liked the morals and the teachings of Christianity. I really loved like the stories of Jesus and how he dealt with people and like his message to people. Peace be upon him. But there, I also had the influence from my school, which the school was very secular, and the school teaches you basically to believe in science, and whatever science whatever science brings you, that's going to be your truth. So sometimes that conflicts, unlike in Islam, of course, where we have basically a total agreement between science and our sacred texts. But that was very hard for me growing up because I had a need to be consistent and to be like fully on board with what I was doing, like as a person. So at about age 20, I started to desire more like spirituality. And so I started looking around for different religions. And I actually came across Islam by accident. I discovered the Quran at a friend's house and I started reading it, and almost immediately I recognized, okay, this is very different from what I thought. Like I'm seeing all these names in this book that I know already, like Noah and Moses and Abraham and Jesus, peace be upon them all. And all these stories are just like the stories I learned in the church. So that's weird. But also it talks about the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and him being the final messenger and him being like the servant of Allah and all these things. So then I had to find out about him. So I went to my library at UNC and I started to read whatever books I could find, which were mostly written by non-Muslims, mostly the Orientalists' writings on him. And I have to say that what I read, it inspired me. I found it to be very agreeable to what I thought a prophet was supposed to be. So now I had a problem, right? Because I still had the Christian beliefs, which that, Jesus came to die for your sins. And if you don't believe in that, you're not going to be saved. And then I had this other concept, or this other influence, which is saying that all the prophets brought the same message: believe in Allah alone. He's known by many different names. He has 99 names, and he was the same God of Abraham, Moses, Jesus. They all had the same message: devote yourself to him, give up other gods, other deities. And then the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So just through reading and through contemplation, I came to the conclusion that Islam was what I wanted to follow. But it took me a long time to actually work myself up to like take the first step and actually take my shahada, which is the two testimonies of faith: ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. I'm saying this for people who might be watching, just to explain everything. I'm, obviously you know all this, you've been Muslim longer than me, right? What, like 19 years for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been watching a lot of your content. I like what you have to say. And it's always nice to hear from other reverts who have been in this thing for a long time, especially people who have been in it longer than me. So that's good. Like I watched your video about your story of conversion and stuff, and it was a lot like mine. I think both of us have kind of like an average story. Would you say so?
Yeah, I think you see a lot of parallels with other people who've converted to Islam. It's it's a lot of self-research. Like it's not like you go to a mosque and you take home materials and then study that for weeks and months. A lot of this stuff we had to find out on our own, and a lot of it is events that happen around that time period that sort of spur you on to read about Islam. I ended up studying Islam because the upcoming invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. So you never know what's going to lead you to start studying about it. And then also on top of that, a lot of it is gauging what's going to happen after you do convert to Islam. How's my family going to react? How am I going to tell my family? What's the Muslim community going to be like? Are they going to accept me? So Yeah. So yeah, no, I think you know, when I hear other conversion stories, it's, you know, you can definitely see a lot of parallels. But you know, growing up in the South, I mean, there's a lot of when people think of the South, you know, they you know, if you're not from the South and you've never, you know, been there, and you know, all of what you hear is, you know, from what you hear in the media, you would think, oh my God, like being a Muslim in the South, you know, how do you survive day to day? But in general, like you know, like after you converted to Islam, like what was the reaction of like your family, community? Was it difficult? Did you have people on your side? Was it a mixed bag? Or what were some of the challenges after you converted?
I would say it was difficult, but mostly because of my expectations.
Mhm.
You know, I never saw myself as being like really like an extraordinary person, especially not like an extraordinary spiritual person. I was really just trying to discover what the truth was for my own self, not become like a leader or something, you know. And when I found it, it gave me such a relief because it like resolved all these tensions in my life. Like I told you, I was between Christianity and atheism, like going back and forth all the time. And once I found Islam, it was like, okay, this is it. You know, believe in one God, reject the other gods, follow all the prophets. You know, um, if you do that, you get Jannah or heaven, paradise, and if you don't, then you know, may Allah save us. You know, the destination is the fire, hell. It seemed very simple to me, and that was just like a relief to me. You know, so I thought in my mind that okay, somebody from my family and friend circle is going to see this, is going to see the value in this like me, you know. So I came with very high hopes and expectations,
Mm.
and unfortunately still to this day not one person has accepted the call.
Mm.
um
Yeah.
so and
Yeah.
I still make dua. I pray for people to, like, you know, open their minds. But that was the biggest challenge for me, because I really did expect like at least one person to join me
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat as you, Tyler, and it's not easy. And you know, may Allah guide our families to Islam, inshallah, and
mean,
Ameen. And you know, like you know, we look at the stories of the prophets. You know, they spent several years, sometimes decades, and you know, decades, you know, or centuries giving dawah to
centuries,
their
yeah.
people. Yeah, you know, like Nuh is a perfect example of that. But you know, and you know, it's not easy to, you know, to have that in mind. And it's you know, but at the same time, you know, at least we finally figured out, you know, what's a lot of these issues are that are preventing your average Westerner from converting to Islam. And that's why, you know, I feel like a lot of hope and positivity when I hear someone, you know, has been listening, you know, to our videos, and you know, they're just like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like this is kind of what's been missing in the dawah. And you know, like it's not that the efforts of, you know, Muslims living here in the West haven't, you know, that there's no utility in that. I mean, you know, they may Allah reward them for their efforts, and you know, we don't want to, you know, look down upon, you know, the soup kitchens and the outreaches and the dawa booths and the open houses. I mean, those are all good things, but I think, you know, now that you've been Muslim for 15 years and I've been Muslim for 19 years, I think in the back of our heads, we started to think, you know what, like there's a missing piece of the puzzle here that that is kind of not there. Was there like an aha moment when you were just like, yeah, I know, I think this is what's missing and what Muslims are doing, and this is how, inshallah, how we can change that? Or is it just that when you saw our channel, it just kind of clicked? You're just like, yeah, you know, we didn't take this communitarian approach like we did with other, you know, non-Muslim communities.
Honestly, it was when I went through your videos from the beginning. I don't think you have those in a playlist. So I remember had to go back and click each one. So if you haven't put those in a playlist, please do that. You know, the ones at the very beginning of your
Yeah,
video history. Yeah.
yeah, the 10 reasons why European Muslim sub-communities are needed, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily because I agreed with your conclusion at the start. I think now that I've listened to more of your stuff, I kind of understand fully what you're getting at. Like you have this idea of a wolf pack, and I love that concept. Like I am all in on that. Like that is such a beautiful like image about the like the white converts to Islam. Like a wolf is not like an animal that you really necessarily like to see. You know, like the wolf typically brings you makes you feel kind of uncomfortable.
Mhm.
You know, but they're still animals that are created by Allah and are worshiping Allah. Like there's the famous hadith about the Sahabi who goes after his sheep, you know, and the sheep has been grabbed by a wolf, and you know he tries to get it back, and the wolf is saying, "What are you doing? This is my risk from Allah." You know,
Yes.
he talks to the man, and he says, "You can't take this from me. This is from Allah." And the guy's like, how are you talking to me? You're an animal. And he says, "Shall I inform you of something more amazing than that?" Muhammad is in Medina telling people about news from the heavens, you know.
Subhanallah.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But so like the wolf pack is like we need like I take it as like we need to be more vigilant to like help each other. Like when we see each other coming into Islam and we see someone taking that first step, which is such like a huge, like they don't know what they're getting into. Like they don't have any idea like what they're about to face. But if we can just kind of snag them and say, hey, you know, like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You know, this is what you can expect in this is what you can expect there. That would really make a huge difference in those people's lives, you know. And I am fully on board with that. And it was just listening to your channels and hearing like so much your channels to your videos and hearing like kind of like what I went through, like echoes of that, and realizing that we all kind of have the same story. Like all the white brothers and sisters who embrace Islam probably have very similar stories. So like we should network and we should share notes, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? It was never about you know, like dividing ourselves from the greater Muslim community. And I think that's like the knee-jerk reaction when people first hear about this idea. And you know, like, because I knew going into this that there are going to be people who are going to be completely opposed to this idea for several reasons. You know, and I guess the first group of people, it's not really a group of people, it's more like a zeitgeist, or like a you know, like a spirit of the times, where it's, you know, I call it the Medina model, where, you know, we should just get rid of any idea that we're, you know, different in any way, and just all be united as Muslims and not be quote unquote divided. And you know, meanwhile, you know, many Muslim subcommunities who've already come to the West have already formed their own organizations and their own restaurants and their own networks. And I think part of, you know, the challenge is, you know, separating these two ideas. I mean, we're supposed to be united as Muslims. We're all one ummah. We should all hold the rope of Allah together. But what does that mean exactly? Does it mean we have to do everything together? You know, does that mean that, you know, the du'ats you see on YouTube are going to have to adjust how they talk, you know, because their non-Muslim families are watching? Or is it better to just compartmentalize these, you know, very important problems that each community is facing, so they can, you know, better deal with the problems that they're facing? And I don't think that's disunity. And I you know, I think people are starting to realize that, you know, is that kind of the same challenges that you saw, like when you were thinking about this? It's like, yeah, like the mosque, you know, they kind of wanted this like, let's all sing kumbaya approach, but it doesn't really work out that way.
Actually, Rob, in my experience, it's been the whole what you call the Medina model or the kumbaya model. I think that's been very positive. That's been one of the more positive things for me, because so first of all, one thing about the South, like I think Asad talked about this with you on the last show, is that there's a stereotype about the South, which is not entirely true, right? The South is one of the largest, most advanced economies in the world. It's very liberal, and in the urban centers, it's extremely liberal. It's extremely like business focused. It's extremely cosmopolitan. Like the area where I live, it's extremely educated. The area where I live, Raleigh-Durham, is one of the most highly educated places in the whole country. And it's also extremely liberal. So, and of course, here in Gastonia, people are well off here too. This place is more conservative. I'm not trying to dump on Gastonia. I love Gastonia too, but I'm just saying, like, the stereotypes aren't necessarily right, is what I'm saying. That's all I'm trying to say. And there's pros and, like, so for a place like Raleigh-Durham, I was very blessed to embrace Islam in that area. Not saying the community here isn't great. Obviously it's great here too. But in Raleigh-Durham, there is a very active, mashallah, very like open and inviting community. And I visited several places, several communities in my life, which embraced me with open arms. And I had so many experiences where people accepted me as one of them. And I truly felt like the brotherhood of Islam. Mm-hmm. Of course, there were issues too, which you talk about in your videos in full. And I think that's probably the reason why people are opposed to your ideas, is because they haven't taken the time to really listen to your content like in full. Because people these days tend to judge based on headlines and based on what they've heard someone say, retweet, whatever. And they don't actually sit down and listen to what someone's trying to say. I think if they actually sat down and listened to what you're saying, people would be more accepting of it.
Yeah, we're living in the age of social media, where if you can't explain your opinion in like 140 characters, like your idea's out the window. Like it's everything is an elevator pitch now. So I mean, yeah. Like I've been trying to pare it down and trying to be as very explanative and and not triggering as possible. That's another thing. On top of only having 140 characters, anything you say will be used against you in a court of law. And if you're not 100%, excuse me, not trying to offend people in any possible way, you have to really walk on eggshells, or else, they're just going to get really offended and block you. But I think, I think we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. I mean, not, like the detractors I've heard have been very few, and the arguments that they make, they're very easily answerable. I think part of it is, moving now to the next step, because, this is introducing a new concept. I mean, it's not really a new concept. I mean, it's existed, throughout Islamic history for centuries. I mean, when you read Thomas Walker Arnold's history of Islam, spread of Islam on the world, when you even look at the Sirah and, the Tabi'in, the Tabi'in going outside of, the Hijaz and spreading Islam to different communities. I mean, this was just a norm. I mean, people lived in their own areas. It was people who lived from those areas who were Muslim, who were leading the dawah in those fields. Whenever Muslims went to a new area, they adapted to the culture there in an Islamically appropriate way. And sometimes it was just one convert giving dawah to his entire town. So I don't, I think once you, I don't know, but the thing is, it's trying to change a culture, even in an organization. Like you talk about like changing a business or, a sports organization and changing the culture there. That sometimes takes a generation. So, I mean, I don't know. I think at what point do we say, okay, let's practically implement this, or do we need more work to try to change people's mindsets before we move forward? I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, I think that the work is ready to begin, honestly, because So in Raleigh Durham, one thing is they're very invested in what you call the Medina model,
Mhm.
based on what the conversations I've had and I've been present for among like organizers and stuff like that, and my friends who are volunteers. It's very important to the Muslims there to have that inclusive environment, like for there not to be like a Somali masjid and an Egyptian masjid and an Indo-Pak masjid. It's very important to them for everyone to be under one roof, praying together side by side, doing the same activities for the kids. They're like fully invested in that model, basically,
Mm.
is what I'm saying. I was going somewhere with this. Where was I going with that?
Take your time.
I'm sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
The Medina, challenging the Medina model.
Oh yeah, yeah. Whether we're ready to start, but yeah, this is where I was going. But um, I was at a Dawah committee recently where there was like 40 people at the meeting and probably like 3 white people, including myself. And the, I guess the chairman put us all in the same group. And I asked, and like I actually like joked with him, but I said, okay, so you got all the white brothers together, all right. And he was like, yeah, yeah. And he just said, yeah, because this is the team that's focused on outreach to non-Muslims. And so we think you guys would be better to reach, the people here, because obviously because you're white. I mean, he didn't say it like that, but he was just saying like, you know, yes, we did put you guys together for a reason. Like it's not just a joke, So I think I was saying people would be receptive to this idea. It's not like it's forbidden for like reverts to associate together. Like no one finds that taboo from my experience in Raleigh Durham. People are totally open to that idea, even though they really push this, what you call Medina model. That's very important to them. They understand that people, people can mix with kind of people from their own background, and it's not like a scandal or something.
Mm. Well, I mean, there's another, I guess there's another group of people, a group of Muslims who, who actually agree with us, but they're not white. That's the thing. Like a lot of African American Muslims, once you explain this concept to them, and you realize, and you explain to them like, look, we're not trying to start like this kind of Muslim KKK, or we're not gonna, create this white supremacist group. And a lot of them are just like, yeah, you absolutely should do that. I mean, I think you have to frame it in a way for them that, this is, going to be good for the entire Muslim community. And I mean, the most important thing for converts when they convert to Islam is to improve the relationship with their family, right? And when you have, let's just take the whole thing about, mutual animosity between, ethnicities and races. Let's just put that all aside. For example, let's take, the First Nations people here in Canada, like the Native Canadians, right? Like the Oneida and the Anishinaabe, right? There's no animosity between Muslims and First Nations people here in Canada, but there's no interaction at all, really. It's not like Muslims go to, the First Nations churches and break bread with them. It's not like Muslims go to, the reserves and talk to First Nations people here. These are two communities that don't communicate with each other at all. So when you have someone who's from a First Nations background who converts to Islam, like they come into the mosque and the Muslim community is like, okay, yeah, let's apply this Medina model and let's include them in. But it's almost like you're not, and you may say, okay, sure, bring in some of your culture and make it, Sharia compliant. And, that's perfectly fine. But, what they don't understand is that culture doesn't exist on an individual basis. I mean, their people are going to be like, they're not going to think, oh, this First Nations convert has kept some of their culture. They're going to think, you left our community to come to theirs. Right? So what we're suggesting is that, you give that First Nations convert the resources so they can better give dawah to their own people, where when they come in, they can, take care of their own affairs. It doesn't mean that they're separated from the greater Muslim community. I mean, there's still you're still going to see them at Friday prayer. You're still going to see them at Eid prayer. They're still going to say Assalamu alaikum to you on the street. But, that's a community where the Muslims are just simply not interacting with the First Nations people at all. So like in Medina, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Sahaba and the Muhajirun, they were heavily invested, in giving dawah to the entire city in Medina, right? So that's the difference, I think. I think in the 7th century Medina, it was a small city, had maybe 5,000-6,000 people living there, 10,000, whatever the amount is. But, and, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Sahaba, they're our role models. Like, we want to act like them in principle. But you can't simply copy and paste what they were doing there and apply it to a metropolitan city in 2022 and think that, it's all going to work out when the Muslim community is simply not interacting with these communities. And I think if you frame it in that way, I think Muslims are going to start to think, yeah, you know what, maybe it's better if we, allow the converts and encourage them, to create their own wolf packs and organizations. And, and that way you relieve, like, you can't tell an African-American mosque, when white converts come in, they want to improve the relationship with their friends and family. So now they have to talk to, like, the MAGA supporter, the father of, this daughter who's just converted to Islam. First of all, he's not going to go to a mosque. If they, if like he's not just MAGA, maybe like Hell's Angels, or maybe he hates Muslims. Even if the Muslim community wants to reach out to that person, odds are he's not going to go to a mosque. And I think once you explain it to the Muslim community like this, I guess, and like if you condense it down into a 2-minute format, then they start to realize, okay, yeah, there's a lot of maybe it's best for us, to collectivize as converts. Does that make sense, Tyler? I mean, I know that it's you're down with this idea. It's just trying to explain this in a way that will convince people, okay, yeah, maybe we should be doing it this way instead.
Yeah, and I think that's just natural. That's just going to be a natural result of people, converts, one. So actually, yeah, let me switch gears here, because I do agree with everything you said, but I want to ask you, do you think that, because both of us agree there's a lot of improvement that should be made in how converts are dealt with in the masjid system, but do you think that any of the responsibility is on the converts ourselves and how we handle ourselves? And can we do a better job, like guiding ourselves to, our own benefit?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely do think so. I mean, it's a huge responsibility. It's not lightly taken. So, we're presenting an image, to our, fellow non-Muslim white people, and, and I know it, like we're human beings, we're going to make mistakes, and sometimes we could be very hard on ourselves, and that's, when we see a lot of converts get burnt out. But I think, trying our best to project an image where, like we, stick together, and, like find family values important, and, we don't give up hope in, trying to give up hope in giving in talking about Islam to our people, because, like you said, it can be, disheartening that, none of our family members have converted to Islam. But, if we project an image where it's like, yeah, like you definitely have your own community, and you have like this sense that, if people do consider to convert to Islam, those resources are in place, and, we have these get-togethers, and we have this sense of camaraderie. Inshallah, you will see more people come into Islam that you never would have thought before. And I think, that it will take some time, but I think once we start to see results, inshallah, people will, I think, like our people will start to come around. So, I mean, we just had our first ever person who converted to Islam from reading Islam for Europeans. So, alhamdulillah, it gives me a
Awesome.
lot of hope, because even if one person converts to Islam, the reward is immense. I mean, like in one hadith, I believe, if someone converts to Islam who is guided by you, of course, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that guides and not us. But if we show them the door and we're their mechanism to convert to Islam, the reward is greater than the heavens and the earth. And
Mm.
inshallah, everyone who's been involved with Islam for Europeans, including yourself, Tyler, I want everyone to share in that reward.
I mean, alaikum.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think, I think we're ready to, implement this, but, starting small, I think, weekly get-togethers is a good thing. And I think, having a place where, we feel comfortable bringing our non-Muslim family members, I think will foster an environment that's easy for them to, more easily for them to come in. I mean, a lot of them aren't going to go to a mosque, even if they have a positive image of Islam. So even if it's meeting at a restaurant every week, that's, like off to the side, that's very chill. And, if we know people are there, then we start to, bring people in, not just converts, but like, the friends and families of converts. And, once we do this, once we establish like a network, then if you just imagine if in every city where there's a Muslim community and a mosque, you have this, this kind of setup, then you can even network between cities, and you start to get these, these small networks going. Then you sort of, create like this kind of domino effect. So I think even just starting out small, I mean, that in and of itself is, is a great starting point.
Yeah, and I think each person has to look at themselves and ask, what can I bring to the table to support reverts? Like I think you had this brother on, I think his name was Mike. I think his name was Maliki Click on your program. And he was talking about how we need to we need to protect the sisters when they embrace Islam from, perhaps suitors to them who might be kind of predatory, and he was suggesting that if a sister is being hurt by her wife, that a team of guys go over and kind of warn him, knock on his door and say, hey, this is our sister, and that may be what he's what his forte is. For me, it's more I'm more into just social togetherness. I will go out for coffee with anybody. I love going out for coffee runs, and I love socializing. So I'm always there for the revert, who wants to just get a cup of coffee after Fajr or whatever, and just just catch up and discuss whatever. And some guys might be more into teaching and education. They might be able to provide pamphlets or books and stuff, and offer guidance to them in religious questions. So everybody brings something different to the table, and we just have to just kind of put forth something and work together and network to make sure we have everything covered.
Yeah, I think you're really gonna have to talk to people and find out what their their strengths are and how they feel that they can improve. You might be someone who's knows the sport really well, maybe they have like a gym program or kickboxing program or whatever. It may be someone I run a tennis league in my local community, so I mean, you may have people who are interested in tennis. So it's all about finding what people's strengths are, and just work on increasing that. The other thing you mentioned, and I mentioned this in one of my videos, is that another one of the difficulties we have is that there's first of all, Islam for Europeans is almost exclusively male. So that's another issue. And I went into this whole thing about how white Muslim women, there's very few who joined our organization to begin with. And, in Islam, you have complete gender separation. And it's not like our African-American brothers and sisters who converted to Islam as a group. So they already had thousands of, Muslim women who, originally, they were the Nation of Islam, and then they converted into Sunni Islam afterwards. But for us, that's going to be tricky because, even if women are interested in an organization, it's we're going to help them have their own auxiliary groups where they can have their own chats. And I don't know, it's going to be tricky because, we don't want to make them feel uncomfortable by being in like these all male spaces. But at the same time, there still has to be some interaction so you can function as a community. So I don't know. Do you have any ideas about that, Tyler? Or, how do we really address this challenge?
You're right. This is one of the challenges of being a revert, is that you're right. In Islam, the male and female spaces are very separated. And if you don't have the network of aunties and, grandmothers and whatever that the born Muslims have, then you don't have any visibility into that world. So, like in some cases, you might not even know if a brother is married or anything, because some brothers won't even talk about that.
Yeah.
So like, I would say just there's going to be some sisters who get what you're saying. Like there's going to be some sisters who take the time to listen to your videos all the way through, and they say, oh, okay, he's not saying that, he's not saying it this, he's saying that. So then they're going to reach out to you, and then they'll be able to like kind of spearhead that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few sisters who've messaged us. So, once we get more on board, I mean, eventually, they will come around and they'll have their own like chats and stuff, and they'll be involved with Islam for Europeans. And I think for us too, I mean, like some of the new group of Islam for Europeans is going to come in. I'm sure maybe their wives want to get involved as well too. It's just going to be very small in the beginning. It's going to be kind of a rough go. But I think overall, I mean, I think we're on the right track. I think, we're trying to be warm and friendly, to the rest of the Muslim community, and they want to see this succeed. It's just very it's just very taboo in several fields for several reasons. I mean, the other model, you talked about the Medina model, but once you go into universities, a lot of youth are getting into the whole Marxist model, where it's like there's many Muslims who are on the progressivist left who really have a lot of disdain for white converts to begin with, and then there are other Muslims who absolutely love white converts, but it's almost like we're the mere exception to the rule. And there's a lot of let's be honest, I mean, like when you go to university spaces and when you talk to some young Muslims, there's a lot of anger and fear and resentment towards the Anglosphere. And I've been trying very hard to say in my videos that these feelings are understandable to a large degree, and the best way to address these issues is to support Islam for Europeans, because one of the arguments that they give as to why it's white people who are the greatest antagonists of Muslims is that like 99% of Muslims are non-white in the Anglosphere. Which begs the question. I mean, if you could snap your fingers and, even let's say 1% of the white population in every Western country was now Muslim, and they're all, like a functioning sub-community, would that not be a good thing, for the Muslims? And on top of that, they don't like this idea of this kind of white pedestalism, like someone converts to Islam and they put them up on a pedestal at the mosque, and they give them all these accolades and positions and, marriage proposals. Did you see that a lot when you converted to Islam? And you see this white brother come in, and then like the Muslim is like, oh, mashallah, they're like, and then they just raise him up on his shoulders and like, oh, you're like the new imam now, and he's giving khutbah next week.
Yeah, there is some of that. There is some of that, and I got the opposite too. And I'll share a couple of stories about that. When I was living in Virginia, I used to go to this masjid once in a while. And I didn't know many people there. I just pretty much just came and prayed and then left. But I remember one day I came in for the Dhuhr prayer, and I'd never been to the Dhuhr prayer before. And it was a pretty small crowd. But after the Salat, a brother came up to me, and I think he was from the administration. He asked me to give a talk.
Wow.
And I didn't even know anyone there. And I was just looking at him like on what? Like no, I mean, you don't even know my name, like it was very strange. And of course, when I first became Muslim too, there were, I did get invited to speak, on stuff. And unfortunately I did accept that invitation one time, and it was something that I regret. Because, like, you don't really know what you're talking about when you're a new Muslim. You're just kind of just going off the dome, as they say, just rambling about whatever. So that wasn't too good. But also there is the opposite, like you said. Like one time I had made friends with this brother, or he's not a brother anymore. Stuff for a lot. Like, I don't know what happened to him, but he seemed like he left Islam. But I went to meet him at this masjid way out of town, like an hour away, because he was a new shahada, and I wanted to help him and like get to know him and stuff. And he didn't show at the masjid. But while we were lining up for Salat, the brother next to me asked me if I was related to Ronald McDonald.
What?
I'm serious. I'm dead serious. He asked me if I was, while we were lining up for Salat.
Wow.
And I just looked at him and I just started praying. I just said, you know what? I'm just going to leave this alone for Allah and just get in my Salat, because there's no way that I can respond to this right now.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, wow. Yeah, you see things like that, and like some of it is under the surface. I think for a long time, I always tell the story when I first converted. Like, this is like my first iftar at like the mosque. This is back in 2003, and we had like someone come in from the Red Cross, or the Red Cross came to the mosque to like give a talk or whatever. And they were, obviously, if any non-Muslim organization comes to a mosque and gives a talk, they're obviously have, positive leanings towards Islam. Like, they're not going there to, be like Tommy Robinson or anything. So you would think, okay, this person, like that's great that he should be greeted. And so I was sitting down, and this, the Muslim guy finished talking, and then he brought in the guy from the Red Cross, and then this I don't know this if he is Palestinian or not, but this Arab kid, he's eating. He looks around, he takes one look at the white guy, and is just like, okay, I'm white, I don't like you. I was just like, damn. And this is during Ramadan. This is during Ramadan too. And this is a guy who comes to the mosque. So in my head, I'm just thinking, okay, whatever. Just a flippant comment. So I guess it was kind of naive at first when I first converted, but now from 2015 onwards, when I went back to university, you really saw this, that like you had one segment of the Muslim youth who was very practicing, and they wanted what's best for the Muslim community as a whole, and they were willing to reach out to anybody, and then you had another segment who on the whole wasn't very religious, but they had a lot of anger and fear and resentment towards the Anglosphere. And instead of being reactionary about it, now I'm trying to think, okay, like maybe it's like there's a lot of Muslims that don't feel this way, so that's one thing, right? So that's one thing important to keep in mind. There's also Muslims who, they still kind of feel this kind of not resentment, but like uneasiness, being in the Anglosphere. So that's understandable. But what's the best way to address these issues? And I think, this whole thing of putting a white person up on a pedestal, you talk to African American brothers, and they despise it, and I don't blame them, because an African American convert to Islam is not going to get the same accolades, and it's like, and they can look at reasons why. I mean, it may be due, there are factors related to racism there, and it may just be that African American Muslims already have a sub community, so they're seen as more normalized. So I don't know. There's stories like this that happen all the time, and I think we can kind of look back and say, yeah, like this is kind of like you have to live through these experiences. You can't really explain it in like there's no book that really talks about this.
Yeah. And I think when you're white, if you embrace Islam, you really have to take a slice of humble pie, really. And you have to understand that what white people have done in the world is just horrible, like in the Muslim world. And we can't run away from that. We have to confront that and accept that, because what that means is there's going to be people, your brothers in Islam, who are going to resent you for your skin color, and they're wrong. Like obviously Allah is not going to judge you for, what other people do, but other people are going to judge you for that. Other people are going to hold you accountable for what your kinfolk, or whatever, are doing in their lands, to their people, so you just have to, I think you just have to just stay humble. And we face, there's people who like, there's people who are gonna look at you and just think about the Iraq war, or whatever happened in India and Pakistan with the British and stuff. I'm not that up on that side of history, but like, there's people who are going to treat you a different way because of that. And you have to just accept that, because that's the world that we live in.
Yeah.
And you can't, like, obviously I wish I could change that. I wish that people who look like me had not done those things,
Yeah.
But
I'm an anti-colonialist. I think Europeans should have never left Europe. So yeah, but I mean, and even myself, like even before I converted to Islam, I was heavily involved in the, like not heavily involved, but I was totally for the protests against the Iraq War, and in 2003 you saw that. I mean, millions of Westerners, like went out and protest in the freezing cold and said, we don't agree with this war, we don't agree with our governments, and they should put a stop to this. And I remember on a radio show someone was saying, well, why should we protest if it's not going to affect anything, if our governments aren't going to listen to us? And the talk show host was like, well, I mean, at the very least, it'll show the Muslim world that we don't agree with what our governments are doing. And so, but I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that at the end of the day, they did what they did. And like you said, this is the world that we live in, that there's going to be a lot of animosity between those groups. I mean, you can Ben Shapiro it all day and say facts don't care about your feelings, and go talk about how the average European didn't benefit from colonialism. It was an economic drain on Britain. And it was the elites that, ended up gaining all this money. You can make as many factual arguments as you want, but at the end of the day, like some people just aren't going to see it that way. And you just have to realize that. I mean, I'm sure they realize, many Muslims realize that, there are, white non-Muslims who don't agree with the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, who don't agree with the occupation of Palestine, who, didn't agree with colonialism. It's just that us as converts, we know that those numbers are more or less 50-50. Whereas some Muslims have the tendency to say it's, 80-20 or 70-30 or 90-10. And it's going to be, it's very difficult to try to convince them of that, so, but I mean, inshallah, I mean, once we start to see that, that this model starts to work, I think, you are going to see some Muslims who, who are on our side, who agree with us, who think that, it's not all hopeless. And I think you're starting to see that. And we, that's great to see that support from a lot of Muslims who are on our side with this whole thing. So have you spoken to like other born Muslims about this idea about Islam for Europeans? Like what's been their reaction? Aside from Asad, I know he agrees with this, but
no, I don't I haven't brought up the specific idea of like white sub communities within like the Muslim Ummah, and even still, like I said, I'm still not quite 100% on board with that solution. You know, just for reasons that I explained, how like in my area, people are fully in on
Yeah,
the what you call the Medina model, like fully invested in
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And like also they've also shown that I have not seen any taboo whatsoever on like white people congregating in the masjid or anything like that. In fact, it seems to be encouraged,
Hmm. Hmm.
so just in from my local perspective, I don't really see a need for that to be like the solution. I see it more like a wolf pack, like you said. We're all individuals and we're all kind of looking out for each other like in our own way,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know. And like even as your guest Mike earlier said, that might include non-white people,
Hmm. Yes.
because as for me, like it could just be for reverts in general, because like as for me, I learned everything I know about Islam from African Americans.
Yeah.
Like like you've mentioned on your show how like they are some of our biggest supports, and that was definitely true for me, like in so many ways. Like everything I learned Arabic from African Americans. I learned it's like Sunnah from them, like Hadith and like dhikr and stuff, and like different things of the Sunnah. They were always there for me. They were my best friends. They basically raised me as a Muslim. And not only that, but even now, like my teacher now in fiqh and tafsir, he is also African American as well. So like I'm, I am greatly in debt to that community, and I always will be. May Allah bless them, may Allah like increase them and give
I
them
mean,
like the reward of everything that I do, in
hmm.
addition to what they do.
Hmm.
I
I mean,
mean,
yeah. And like they always talk about that they need a revitalization of the African American community. Another, like mass conversion to Islam, like number two, because and you kind of see that, and they want like like a revitalization of the African American community, and there's no reason why these two struggles can't work in tandem. I mean, like I think that they would absolutely love it, to go to like like a small town in the US one day and see like a whole community of white Muslims, and just completely be accepted, and like pray in the same rows as us, and break bread with them. There's no reason why that like we need to be completely separate. I think you know if you're the white convert who tries to like work himself into like the African American masjid and like try to like I mean, they're running the show in their masjids, and it's a shame what happened to their masjids, because they were kind of just pushed out by like like a lot of these other big mosques, from people from the Muslim world, where they had like millions of like oil money and like they're getting all the donations and everything, and it's really tragic that mosques that were run by African American communities don't have the money or resources that they once had. So that's a big issue. It's almost like this kind of gentrification of like the African American Muslim community. So we support their endeavors 100%, and we want to see that. But there's no reason why we can't work towards giving dawah to our own people. I don't know. I had the whole idea of like and like we don't agree with. I know these groups were involved, like are kind of like taboo to talk about, but you have the Hells Angels and the East Bay Dragons, right? And people don't realize this, but actually the Hells Angels and the East Bay Dragons had actually a good relationship with each other. So even though the Hells Angels was 100% white and East Bay Dragons was 100% black, they would meet up and actually like party together. So because it was the same shared like motorcycle culture that they
yeah.
both shared. So something like that, but not with any illegal activity or drinking alcohol or eating pork spare ribs or anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know, do you want to shift gears a little bit, Tyler? Like like do you have like, what's the, like, is there any like, I don't know, like, do you have any experience with like, I don't know, is there anything you wanted to talk about specifically, Tyler? Shifting gears. I know we talked about Islam for Europeans a lot, but anything that you had on your mind that you wanted to bring up, or?
Yeah, like one thing like I wanted to talk about was just in general, like how converts can, how they can like handle themselves better, you know,
Hmm.
because it is really overwhelming. Like I did want to talk a little bit about how things went for me after I became Muslim, like directly after, because I think there's benefit in that for anybody who's interested in being Muslim, or maybe they just took Shahada or something. You know, when after I took Shahada, so I actually studied for like a year in secret, and I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I think this is also common for white reverts as
Hmm.
well. That once we kind of have that light bulb go off, that hey, Islam really makes a lot of sense. You know, a lot more than what I was believing before. We're kind of scared to bring that up with people because we feel like we're gonna get. I guess because we feel like we're going to get attacked for it, but also because we're afraid of the peer pressure. I think that's the main thing, because it's really the peer pressure more than anything else. Um, because for some reason there's just this idea that white people cannot be Muslim. Like it just does not make sense to people. Like even now, like I like to wear Islamic clothes sometimes, um, because it's something that brings me joy personally, not because I have to, but because it's something I like to do. And I've always been someone who I just do whatever I like to do, typically. You know, I've been a free spirited person like that. So sometimes I'll go to my office and I'll put on like I'll have my turban and I'll have like a shalwar kameez. And I was talking to this lady one time, and she asked me about it, and I explained to her that I'm a Muslim, and she said, "You know what? I never would have thought you were Muslim." You know, and I get that all the time. People just like people think that I'm Jewish or I'm Amish or something, or it's just it never crosses people's mind
Yeah.
that I could be Muslim even if I'm wearing the full uniform.
Yeah, and that's yeah, and that's that's one of the challenges we have to deal with, because like even to mention the word Islam in front of your friends, families, communities, it's not as if they're going to have an angry reaction. It's more like it's like kind of like that record stopping, like you mentioned
Yeah.
Islam in a white space.
Exactly. Exactly.
But and that's why we didn't call ourselves Islam for white people, because it has such like a negative connotation to it. But if you call it Islam for Europeans, there are already Muslim populations in Europe, indigenous Muslim populations. I mean, you have Bosnia, you have Albania, you have Chechnya. There is a Muslim minority population in Bulgaria, Lithuania. So those populations exist. And I would love to interview. I've interviewed a few Bosnians, but I would love to interview Muslim populations for that group. But and Ilya Izetbegovic, the father of modern Bosnia, like he proposed the idea of being a European Muslim. That it's this this identity that we should be proud of. So I think once we kind of establish that in people's minds, I mean, I think just by thinking of that, just you don't need to go into all these details. You don't need to show them a 20-minute video from I4E. You just need to show them look, these are people from the same background as us, and they're Muslim. They are distinctly European, but they don't do any of the haram things that we do, and they're fully supported by the Muslim community. I think if you frame it like that, then they'll start to think, oh, maybe this isn't. I shouldn't try to act all exotic and I'm pushing forth an image that this is it's like enclosed cognition, and that's why we want to start encouraging the idea of kind of like in a European Islamic fashion line. So I don't know how that's going to take shape. I do know that even when you look at Qatar World Cup, the Qataris were very smart and having the whole like gutra for like, the World Cup, people visiting the World Cup were not from Arab nations. And, instead of having it be a white sheet, it's, the flag of their nation. So I know that's kind of like a small example, but, we can get creative and start to think of, hey, like our, people who are our ancestors wore this kind of clothing. We can make it Sharia compliant. It's just, establishing that is just going to take some time.
Yeah, and also there's nothing wrong with wearing clothes that are not from your culture. After all, isn't cultural appropriation like that's like part of our culture, right?
Well,
So
that's
we're just
another.
following our ancestors.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and this would be a perfect counter argument to people who say, white people shouldn't LARP as South Asians or Arabs, and if they truly feel that way. And I remember, there was a white convert who tweeted this, and he wasn't part of Islam for Europeans, and he was just like, well, fine, how about I just wear this? And he showed like this, outfit from like medieval Europe or whatever. And then I was like, yeah, I unironically agree with this.
Dude, I would totally rock some medieval clothes. Absolutely. Like a nice cloak or something or a cape. I would totally rock that.
So that's what I did for Eid last year, and I tried to get the people in I4E to do this as well. You can get creative with it. You don't have to go back to medieval times, but I think if we dress this kind of like Renaissance fair type style without
Definitely.
any like Christian or haram clothes or whatever, I think people will get the idea without having to say a word. Because when I walked in there in the masjid, they absolutely loved it. Like they're like, "This is awesome. Where did you get it?" So yeah, I mean, I think those little things right there, that's a good thing as a starting point while we're trying to establish this conceptual foundation. There's no reason why we can't, network together and inshallah get, other people on board. I mean, we've already had people in the UK who are Islam for Europeans who've met up with one another. We've already had people here in London and Toronto meet up with each other in Canada. I don't think it'll take long, Tyler, for you to get some Islam for Europeans members in the whole North Carolina region. And, so I think, inshallah, it'll start to grow, from city to city. But yeah, getting back to what you talked about converts not, projecting like an image and like how they should behave when they first convert to Islam. I mean, is there are kind of things that I look back upon, just like, yeah, man, that was kind of embarrassing how I acted. I mean, like, no one, you're gonna like go through all these like situations where it's gonna be like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have been like that. I remember like, like it was during a Juma prayer. It was like the mosque was just completely packed, right? And near the end of the khutbah, someone had like a seizure, like in the masjid. Like it was like an older guy just like having a seizure in the masjid, right? And as I was leaving, like there were all these people, right? And no one was really, they're just kind of standing around doing nothing and stuff. And the ambulance was trying to get in, to the mosque. And I just lost it because I was thinking in my head, like, this brother could die. So I just started like, why isn't everybody moving? Just move. People thought it was just like nuts. So I don't know, like maybe did I do the right thing? Because I know my niyyah was like, I don't want someone to die, but like, at the same time, it was just like, I don't know, maybe I was just the lone wolf. Did you ever run into situations like that, Tyler? I'm sure you did.
Oh man, let me think. I don't think I ever had a public freak out like that. I'm generally a pretty calm guy.
Yeah.
But in public. But let's see. I guess if there's one thing I really regret, it's how I dealt with my beloved parents when I first became Muslim, because I was watching a lot of videos by like Ahmed Didat, rahimahullah, and like Zakir Naik, and those guys are amazing. Mashallah, may Allah May Allah reward them for all they did for the dawah. But it's a very like, it's a very kind of in your face,
Yeah.
almost kind of harsh kind of message that you're bringing to people, and definitely not the character that you should have towards your parents at any point.
Mm.
So I was coming to them with a lot of, unfortunately, with a lot of arguments and talking points, when I really should have just been coming to them with just kindness and just trying to help them and trying to like reassure them that I'm not going to become some crazy person or something, because it is very overwhelming
Mhm.
for your son to change religion and for anyone to become Muslim in this society. It's very like nerve-wracking, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And especially for us, when we don't, it's overwhelming because there's an uncertainty, because there's so many directions you could take in Islam. And for me, I've always been a very open-minded person. I like to hear lots of different people and what they have to say. So I think that kind of brought another factor of like nervousness, like, you know, who's going to influence Tyler now, you know? And overall, I think Allah guided me to what was suitable for me at each point. But I do wish that I had not spent that first year trying to like go back and forth with my parents about religion. And I would recommend any convert, do not do that with your parents at any point, because that's not what they're, that's not, ultimately that's a sin, first of all, you know, if you make your parents upset in any way. And second of all, because it's not going to make them, it's not going to make their heart soften to Islam anyway.
Yeah.
So just leave it.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And, looking back, alhamdulillah, I think, like I had a good network of converts who, like helped me out and tried to like explain, like, hey, this is how you should interact with your family, because they've been there before. But I agree. I mean, there's a time and a place for the Ahmed Deedat style. I mean, like their whole job is, doing discourse with people who are antagonized to Islam to begin with.
Exactly.
So like, your Tommy Robinsons and your Douglas Murrays and your like the really anti-Islam people, they're drawn to like these dais who themselves, that's the people that they're trying to, debunk, right? But when you try to take that into your own family, it doesn't work there. It's not the same. It's not the same situation. No, it's not appropriate. And like when you have converts there who can tell you, like, yeah, man, who can counsel like these new Muslims, I think that it's going to provide a lot of value to them, and they're going to not burn those bridges and not make the same mistakes that we did. So
yeah. Also, the biggest regrets I have from, I mean, everything is from Allah's decree, so I can't say I have any regrets, but if I would do differently, when I reflect on my life in that period, I realized that I just had this need for everything to become simple after taking my Shahada. And I think part of that's because Islam itself is so simple. Like the beliefs are so simple, like believe in Allah, believe in his messengers, his books, his angels, divine decree, paradise, hellfire. Like that idea is so simple and it's so consistent. You think that everything in your life now is going to have that same simplicity to it. And unfortunately for us reverts, that's just not the case. Like, and it can never be the case. So when I embraced Islam, I got very overwhelmed with all the decisions and all the different like different fatwas about different things and different opinions and like who to trust and who to follow. And I just had this need for people to just tell me what to do, basically. So I kind of had like almost a culty mindset in the beginning, in which I was limiting myself, and that kind of put me in situations where there's certain things you can't go back and redo. There's a situation where I had a death in the family and I didn't even show.
Yeah.
to say condolences or anything. And it was because I had people giving me advice that wasn't great, but also because I was just afraid.
Hmm.
You know, I was afraid of like compromising myself in some way, like I'm some kind of pure, like holy guy, you know, like that's, and it's like when I look back, it just sounds so like ridiculous that I wouldn't even just go home and just give my condolences. This was someone who was always kind to me and very close to me,
Hmm.
and they died in such a tragic way, and like I'm just gonna just forget about them and just go on. Like it's a horrible thing that I did,
Hmm.
you know. And I think many converts will be faced with that. So like, and I think this comes out, you can kind of tell, because sometimes when people embrace Islam, we don't want to take advice sometimes. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Like, and you wouldn't think that would be the case, because you think, okay, you entered this religion and now you're changing your whole life up into something that's you've never known before, so you should be like ready to receive advice from anybody. But sometimes reverts, we don't want to take advice. And I think that's because we have this need for things to just be simple, you know. But we have to get through that, and we have to just like let that go, you know. Life is not simple.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think a large part of that is, when a lot of people convert to Islam, they'll just take advice from anybody, and when you don't have an imam
Right.
who's well educated in Islam, who understands that fatwa khas, and just realizes that this convert is in a very delicate situation, and like we need to know exactly what they're going through so that we can give the best advice. If you start taking your opinions from anyone on Twitter or anyone on the internet, or
Or just any brother,
yeah,
in the masjid.
yeah, there's no chain of command. It's just like anyone can give any advice to anyone at any time, and they'll take it as, say, okay, this is what I should be doing,
Yep.
and the effects can be devastating.
It can.
And like a lot of these converts, like it's very, once they convert to Islam, it can be very time sensitive. You may only have like a 2-week window
Exactly.
to get your parents to accept you, or the people you're living with to be all right with your conversion. Like I was talking to one well-known convert to Islam who's against what we're doing, and he said, like, I said, look, like, you might not even have within that 2-week window an imam who's willing to talk to your non-Muslim family, and even if they are, your non-Muslim family may not be willing to talk to them. And like, and it just couldn't get through his head. Just like, well, I mean, like, as long as you have an imam that's ready to talk to them once, like, it should be okay. It's like, no, it's a constant struggle, and you may not have the time and the effort, to get someone, to like talk to them. So a lot of it is just up to the convert themselves. They just, they're just in this situation all alone, and like and that's the case. They just need to be given the best possible advice. And inshallah, I mean, once they have that advice, once they're back on their feet, then they can get the resources that they need. But when you're not even when there's a danger of your physiological or safety needs not even being met, if you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's not going to matter how many books you give them. It's not going to matter, like,
Yeah.
how educated they're going to be, or all the other things that you want for them. It's just going to fall flat on its face. So yeah. So what like, we have maybe a couple minutes left, Tyler, but I guess, I don't know, is there anything else you wanted to bring up, Tyler, or anything you wanted to talk about?
So many things, Rob.
Yeah, I
So many
know.
things. But like, I don't want to, I don't want to wear out my welcome, as we say,
No.
So
There's plenty of time. Oh, we can go on for another 10, 15 minutes. It's not a problem. Like like when it comes to, say, for example, a lot of this is just, I think, when you have people who are on your side when you're a convert to Islam. You may have like maybe one aunt or one uncle or one like maybe even one of your family members. You know, it's like I said, in some of these situations, it's kind of a mixed bag. Like you may have some people who support you as a Muslim, some people who don't. I think, what about strengthening the resources that those people have? Because, you know, like a lot of the times you might have an aunt or uncle who supports you. But at the same time, they don't really want to enter the Muslim sphere. So how do we kind of reach? Another good question is how do we reach those people?
Mm.
Do you have any experience with that, or
Like, how do you reach people who might be like receptive to Islam from your family and friends, but maybe not ready to take a step, like go to an open house?
yeah,
Is that what you're
exactly. I
saying?
mean, yeah, it's not about getting them to convert. It's about, you know, like strengthening the resources that they have, so that you know now have more people in your corner.
Oh yeah, I get it. How do you find that Abu Talib, right?
Yes, yes. Like I had the model of like a scale. Like I, created this kind of invisible scale where it's like from -100 to +100, right?
Hmm.
And like you have some when you convert to a -100 is someone who completely hates Islam. Like they hate it so much they want you dead. They don't want to be anywhere near you. They want to hear anything about Islam. +100 is like this person's ready to like convert to Islam themselves, right? 0 is like they're neutral. Like they couldn't care either way. Convert to Islam, okay, that's cool, but as long as it doesn't affect me, they don't hate it nor love it, right? And everywhere in between. So I think if you had kind of have this model, like, okay, my aunt's a +10, my uncle is a -20. I think if we have this kind of model, it's about incrementally moving them forward in the right direction. So it's not about, you can't take, and that in and of itself, at every 10 point increment, that strategy may be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think I get it. How do we like raise our like cultural acceptance of Islam within like white people is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is actually, I wanted to bring this up with you, but we can talk about it maybe at a later time.
Mhm.
And that was something I've been thinking about for a very long time. And that is, I don't think it's ever been really dealt with sufficiently. People have ideas and answers for this that they thought of, but there's no scientific study. Why are white people not converting to Islam?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because and here's why I asked that. And I think this is related to your question, because if you look at the African American community, even if you come to an average African American person and say, "Oh, I'm Muslim," and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've got an uncle who's Muslim."
Yeah.
Or I've got a cousin who's a Muslim, or maybe they might have a cousin who has a Muslim name, but is not Muslim. Or maybe they might themselves have a Muslim name,
Yeah.
So like they have that cultural acceptance already where there's somebody in their family, somebody they grew up with. So they know they don't feel threatened by Islam because it's like part of their culture already. But for us white people, it's like if you come to your family and say I'm Muslim, they're looking at you like you're saying I'm a Martian or something.
Yeah.
Like what is an like you're an Islam? Like what is an Islam, like that.
Yeah.
But then when you explain it to them, they're like, oh, well, that just sounds like what we believe already. So what's the difference? Like it's kind of a crazy, like, crazy thing. But so that's what I like to know. I think if we could answer that question, we would be able to do that, because it's so, when you think about it, it's really strange because white people and African Americans share so much of our culture, really.
Yeah, white Americans and African Americans, yeah.
Like compared to like other groups of people, like Asian people or Arabs or whatever, white people and African Americans are very similar, same schools we go to, same kind of jobs we go to, same areas we live in, we intermarry, like even among the non-Muslims, we're very close in our culture. So why is only one group embracing Islam and the other one is not?
It's true. It's absolutely true.
we need to find an answer to that, I think. And I don't think it's just a matter of saying, well, I think this, I think that. No, we need to like seriously have like a scientific approach to this and figure out, because it's very strange. Like, why is there only like one white Muslim in a given masjid?
Well, I mean, the
You
thing is,
know?
yeah, it's a multi-layered question. I think, first of all, Muslims don't do a lot of research to begin with. I mean, they don't do a lot of survey research. It's not their forte. Like when I did my master's degree in applied social psychology, even when I was doing my undergraduate, I was the only Muslim in the classroom. So, you know, like Muslims focus heavily on the hard sciences, STEM fields, right? So, surveying populations is difficult. And when they do survey populations, they don't understand all of these biases that occur in research. Like, there's one famous study, and this relates perfectly to your question as to why don't white people convert to Islam. In World War II, there was, you know, the military conducted this study as to why, where to put the extra space or extra weight we have for armor onto airplanes, military airplanes. So what they did was, for the airplanes that returned back from the war, they put a red dot where the bullet holes were, right? And they lined up all these airplanes that came back, you know, from battle, and they looked at where all the bullet holes were, and based on that, where most of the bullet holes were, they would put extra armor. Okay, so they did this, and they found that it wasn't working. That this was not working at all, and it wasn't until they hired a statistician from Columbia University. His name is Abraham Wald. And he looked at, you know, their study, and they said, okay, this is completely flawed. What is happening is that the airplanes that are being hit in these specific areas where you're not seeing the bullet holes, they're crashing. They're not returning they're not returning from battle for you to conduct your study, to be as a data point for your study. So you need to reverse engineer it. So you need to look at where there's no bullet holes and put the armor there. So this is what we call in research methods survivorship bias.
Okay, I get it. So you're saying that we just don't see them because they're not surviving. Yes. They're embracing Islam, but they're exiting Islam, right? That's what I'm getting from you. Okay.
Yes. So we're basing all of our research, when we finally do research on converts, on the existing converts that are already coming to a mosque, where it should be the opposite. We should be looking at the converts that are embracing Islam, but, you know, not, or people who are interested in Islam but not converting in the first place. So it's a lot easier. Right. Yeah, go ahead.
Like, but even if I watch like I went through a period where I watched a lot of videos from Uthman ibn Farouk recently, because I really liked his videos, and I was watching a lot of them, all the shahadas he was getting, and I don't see a lot of white people represented in those. So I'm not sure that's just one particular da'i who may not be effective to white people. Who knows? But like it's just such a huge difference. Like, you talk about the difference between the number of African Americans versus white Americans who are Muslim is like such a humongous difference, like hundreds, if not thousands to one.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it requires an explanation, you know, because it's such a strange thing. Like, the two cultures have the same language, same area, same entertainment, same education. Everything is the same almost, compared to other cultures anyway. I know there's differences obviously between the two cultures, but compared to like somewhere like India or something, they're very close. So why is only one becoming Muslim? To me, I'd like to know the answer to that. Like,
well, I have my own explanations. I mean, you know, first of all, like any conservative group in America, let's see how I can word this without getting canceled. Any conservative group in America has to take, you know, this.
You can't be canceled. It's your show, Rob.
Oh, I know. Well, I only have 1,400 subscribers.
We won't cancel you.
You have to take a pro-Zionist stance if you want to be any conservative party or group or media outlet in the United States or in the West. You know, for example, like Douglas Murray is a very pro-Zionist, and you know, he has a best-selling book. And he sold like millions of copies, right? So first of all, his ideas get spread more often into the Anglosphere, right? If you're an anti-Zionist, or if you're against the invasions of the Muslim world, or if you have a more positive stance towards Islam, you are going to be canceled by the mainstream media. So you're not even going to get your ideas to spread. And before 9/11, the pro nationalist white groups actually had a neutral to positive image of Islam. People don't realize that. But the thing was, they were pushed out when 9/11 happened, because the mainstream conservative media, they wanted to introduce this kind of new, nationalist brand that's like this anti-Islam, pro-Zionist brand. And they brought in people like Tommy Robinson and Douglas Murray and Milo Yiannopoulos out into the forefront and gave them all this media coverage. So if you're a Muslim who doesn't really interact with the Anglosphere, all you're going to see is these people. You're not going to see like the kind of like the white influencers who have a kind of a neutral or even pro-Islam stance, right? So that's one thing. And secondly, it's this, and we're in 2022. I mean, we're coming to this big civilizational conflict where, the universities are really ramping up this kind of mutual animosity between Muslims and white people. And it's not even, Muslims and Christians anymore. Like in 150 years ago, this wasn't even like part of the discourse. It was all about like the civilizational battle between, the Muslim world and, the Christian world. So at least when you're talking about Muslim Christian, there's at least some commonalities there. We both believe in Isa alayhi salam, but in different aspects. But when you make it about race, then because these people have nothing in common, right? Mm-hmm. So converting to Islam as a white person in 2022 is, you're in the middle of this, mutual civilizational conflict and anger between these two groups. And, plus on top of that, after 9/11, there was, let's be honest, a lot of, I guess Muslims were, just surveyed more at airports, at, the border. They were questioned more. And, obviously the people in the government and the police, are majority white. So they're going to have this negative reaction, and obviously so, to that. So you're seeing like the backlash now. Like it's sort of like this us versus them thing. And, white Muslims are really caught in the middle. So the only people who are going to convert to Islam, if they're from a European background, is in one of two situations. Either they have a really good relationship with their family to begin with, and they're an accepting liberal family, or they may even be very far left themselves. So converting to Islam, it's not a big deal for them. And the other extreme is like your white convert who has, their family's completely rejected them to begin with. They don't have a good relationship with their family, or maybe their family's just not in the picture. So these people who you do see come to the mosque, how they convert to Islam is going to have no effect on their family at the end of the day. So I think that's kind of what you're seeing now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're basically saying like the media environment, or like the cultural environment, puts up an obstacle for white people to consider Islam. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Although still, to me, that's not enough to explain the difference, though. Like the difference is so huge.
Yeah.
Like it needs to be accounted for.
Well,
scientifically.
I mean, Islam is now part of the fabric of the African American experience. Even if you're a Black person in the United States who has no Muslim family members and you convert to Islam yourself, people know about Muhammad Ali. People know about Malcolm X, right? So, and that's not to discount. There are many Black brothers and sisters who go through turmoil with their family. But it's still.
But they're at least familiar with it as a thing.
Yes, exactly.
They may be opposed to it, but it's not like they're coming home and saying, I'm like, like for us, it's like, it becomes almost a threat.
Yeah.
To some people when you say you're Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I don't
But
know, just
I,
something to noodle.
yeah, but I wouldn't be too I wouldn't get too distraught over this though, because like I said, we're getting a lot of positive support, and even among the Anglosphere. I mean, we have white people who are just like, this is a really cool way of looking at things, and you're really changing the game. And like, there's that counterculture of kind of like the white people on the right who are actually pro-Islam, and they see the positive things in it. And like I said, these people are they're not in the mainstream. A lot of them have been deplatformed. A lot of them are very careful about what they say, and they don't normally reach out to Muslims anyway, because they don't want the Muslims themselves to get in trouble for ever interviewing them. So I think we should just keep this positivity going, because like inshallah it'll turn around, and we're gaining a lot of positive support. So
Yeah.
but
No,
I'll
it's just food for thought. I'm totally on board with the positive attitude. That's one reason too why I love your channel, because it's like you're seeing a future that nobody else is seeing, Rob, and I like that. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're looking 5, 10, 20 years in the future. So but anyway, thank you so much for coming on, Tyler. It was a pleasure. Really glad to talk to you over the video. And like, hey, like, just consider yourself one of the founding members of Islam for Europeans, even though you haven't officially signed something.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
No problem. And tell Asad I said Salam alaikum.
Okay,
Please like and subscribe to Islam for Europeans. This is Rob, Beef, Bacon, and Eggs. I'm here with Tyler Boyd from North Carolina, and we are signing off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Stream.